They brought my replacement to Christmas dinner while I carved the turkey. Her father introduced him as perfect for Bethany after the divorce, but they forgot one tiny detail. I own everything, and my 17-year-old daughter had been secretly recording their plans for months. My name is Henry Mitchell. I'm 47 years old, and I've been married to Bethany for 18 years. We've got 2 kids, Mia, who's 17 and sharp as a tack, and Owen, who just turned 15 and has more common sense than his mother ever will. I run a successful contracting business here in Denver, inherited our house from my grandmother, and thought I had my life pretty well figured out until this past Christmas showed me just how wrong a man can be about the people closest to him. The morning started at 5:30, which is nothing new for me. I've always been an early riser, and Christmas Day was no exception. The house was quiet, snow falling outside our windows like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. I should have been content, maybe even happy, but there was this knot in my stomach that I couldn't shake. Call it intuition, call it dread, but something felt off about the whole day before it even started. Bethany was still asleep upstairs, probably wouldn't surface until noon if past holidays were any indication. That left me handling all the Christmas morning preparations alone, which had become the norm over the past few years. I started the coffee, began prepping the turkey, and got the side dishes ready for later. The kids would be up soon, wanting to open presents, and I wanted everything perfect for them. They deserved that much, even if their mother couldn't be bothered to help make it happen. By 7, Mia wandered into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, but already looking more alert than most adults manage before their second cup of coffee. She's got her grandmother's eyes, and unfortunately inherited my stubborn streak, which has served her well dealing with her mother's increasingly erratic behavior. "Morning, Dad," Mia said, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. "Mom's still sleeping, huh?" I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything charitable about Bethany at that moment. Mia's smart enough to read between the lines anyway. She's been watching the tension in this house build for months, and I know it's affecting her. No kid should have to navigate their parents' marriage problems, but here we are. Owen joined us a few minutes later, and we had a quiet family breakfast while Bethany remained upstairs. The kids opened their presents with genuine enthusiasm, which made the morning feel almost normal. Almost. But I kept checking the clock, knowing that Bethany's family would be arriving later, and that knot in my stomach just kept getting tighter. Something was coming. I could feel it in my bones. By 10 o'clock, things started getting interesting in ways I never saw coming. Mia had been helping me prep vegetables for dinner when she suddenly stopped chopping carrots and gave me that look, the one that says she knows something she probably shouldn't. "Dad," Mia said, glancing toward the stairs to make sure Bethany was still upstairs, "I need to tell you something important." The way she said made my blood run cold. When your 17-year-old daughter uses that tone, you know you're about to hear something that'll either break your heart or make you want to punch a hole in the wall. Maybe both. "What's going on, sweetheart?" I asked, setting down the knife I'd been using to trim the turkey. Mia pulled out her phone and looked at Owen, who had been setting up his new gaming console in the living room. He must have been listening because he came into the kitchen immediately, like they planned this conversation. "We know about Mom," Owen said quietly, "about what she's been doing." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. "What do you mean?" "Mia, show me your phone." On the screen was a voice recording app, and I could see dozens of files dated over the past 3 months. "We've been recording her phone calls, Dad. The one she takes upstairs when she thinks we're asleep." My hand started shaking as I realized what they were telling me. My own kids had been gathering evidence of their mother's betrayal. Part of me was proud of them for being smart enough to protect themselves and me. The other part was heartbroken that they'd had to grow up this fast. "How much do you know?" I asked. Owen answered first. "We know about the guy named Brett. We know about the hotel meetings. We know Grandpa Vernon's been helping pay for everything. And we know they're bringing him here today," Mia added. "Mom thinks we don't pay attention, but we heard her talking to Aunt Candace last week. They're planning to introduce him to you as her future boyfriend." The audacity of it hit me like a freight train. Not only was Bethany cheating on me, but she was planning to parade her replacement around our Christmas dinner table like some kind of twisted family reunion. "There's something else, Dad," Mia said, her voice getting softer. "We know about the college fund money." That stopped me cold. The college fund was supposed to be untouchable, money I've been saving since the kids were born. "What about it?" "Mom's been taking money from it," Owen said. "Small amounts, but we found the statements she threw away. We saved them." These kids have been protecting me better than I've been protecting myself. They'd seen what was happening and taken action while I'd been walking around in denial, hoping things would just work themselves out. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Mia looked at Owen, and they had one of those silent conversations that siblings have when they've been through something together. We wanted to make sure we had everything, Mia said. All the evidence. All the proof. We knew this day would come, and we wanted you to be ready. Ready. My kids were more prepared for my marriage to explode than I was. By noon, Bethany's family started arriving like a pack of wolves circling a wounded deer. Vernon and Lorraine Hayes pulled into our driveway in their oversized SUV, acting like they owned the place despite never contributing so much as a casserole to any family gathering in 18 years. Vernon's got that particular brand of arrogance that comes from middle management success. Just enough authority to be dangerous, not enough wisdom to use it properly. Henry, Vernon said when I opened the door, giving me that condescending handshake he's perfected over the years. House smells good. Hope you didn't overdo it this time. Lorraine swept past me without so much as a hello, already critiquing the decorations I'd put up while her daughter was upstairs getting ready for whatever performance she had planned. These people had a talent for making you feel unwelcome in your own home, and they'd been practicing that skill on me for nearly 2 decades. Where's our Bethany? Lorraine asked, like she was inquiring about visiting royalty instead of a woman who'd been lying in bed until noon on Christmas Day. Getting ready, I said, not bothering to hide the edge of my voice. She'll be down soon. Candace arrived 20 minutes later, bringing her usual combination of fake sweetness and barely concealed hostility. Bethany's younger sister had always resented that her sister had married first, and she'd spent years trying to undermine our marriage with little comments and suggestions that Bethany could do better. Merry Christmas, Henry, Candace said, air kissing me like we were at some fancy cocktail party instead of family dinner. You look tired. Everything okay at home? The way she said, everything okay at home, told me she knew exactly what was coming. This whole family was in on whatever Bethany had planned, and they were all sitting here acting innocent while plotting my destruction. Mia and Owen had been watching from the living room, and I could see them exchanging glances. We'd agreed they'd keep recording if things got interesting, which they were about to do in a big way. Bethany finally made her appearance around 1 o'clock, dressed like she was attending a business meeting instead of Christmas dinner. She'd done her hair and makeup with the kind of precision that suggested this was a special occasion, just not the kind that included celebrating with her husband. Family's all here, she announced, which was interesting phrasing considering I was standing right there and apparently didn't count as family anymore. Vernon started going on about some business deal he was working on, bragging about his connections and the kind of money he was making. The man had been a middle manager of the same insurance company for 20 years, but he talked like he was running Wall Street. Meanwhile, Lorraine was critiquing everything from the temperature in the house to the music I'd chosen. Henry, dear, Lorraine said in that patronizing tone she'd perfected. Did you remember to baste the turkey? Last year was a bit dry. Last year's turkey had been perfect, but Lorraine would find fault with a meal prepared by Gordon Ramsay if it meant making me feel inadequate. That was her specialty, death by 1,000 small cuts, each criticism designed to chip away at my confidence and my place in this family. But today was different. Today I had allies, and I had information. Today I wasn't going to just smile and take it while they treated me like hired help at my own dinner table. Turkey's fine, Lorraine, I said, just like it is every year. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, and everyone could feel it. Something was building toward a confrontation, and we all knew it. The only question was who would make the first move. At 1:30, the doorbell rang with the kind of timing that suggested someone had been waiting in their car for the perfect moment. Bethany jumped up like she'd been shot from a cannon, practically sprinting to the door with more enthusiasm than she'd shown for anything involving our family in months. She came back with him. Brett Coleman looked exactly like what Central Casting would order if you asked for a generic successful white guy, tall, artificially tan, wearing a sweater that probably cost more than most people's rent. He had that practice smile that screamed insurance salesman mixed with country club member, and he was carrying a bottle of wine that still had the grocery store price tag if you looked close enough. Everyone, Bethany announced, her voice higher and more animated than I'd heard it in years. I'd like you to meet Brett Coleman. Vernon practically leaped out of his chair like Brett. was some kind of visiting celebrity. Brett, so good to finally meet you in person. We've heard wonderful things. Finally meet in person. That phrase hit me like a slap in the face. This wasn't a surprise introduction. This was a planned meeting, probably the culmination of weeks or months of preparation. They'd all been talking about Brett behind my back, probably comparing him to me and finding me wanting. Brett here works in finance, Vernon continued, puffing up like a proud peacock showing off someone else's feathers. Just made partner at Coleman and Associates. I noticed the name similarity wasn't a coincidence. This guy came from money, probably inherited his position along with his trust fund. Meanwhile, Lorraine was practically glowing, giving Brett the kind of warm reception she'd never once given me in 18 years of marriage. And Brett, Vernon said, his voice taking on that tone people use when they're about to drop a bomb they think is brilliant. Brett here will be perfect for Bethany after the divorce. The silence that followed was deafening. Brett looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else on earth, including a root canal appointment. Bethany had gone white as a sheet, probably realizing her father had just blown up her careful plan with all the subtlety of a freight train. Even Candace looked shocked, and she lived for family drama. But me? I set down my fork, reached for my dinner roll, and started buttering it with the kind of deliberate calm that comes when you've been expecting something awful and it finally arrives. The butter spread perfectly across the warm bread, and I took my time making sure every corner was covered. Then I looked up at this room, full of people who apparently thought I was some kind of idiot, and I smiled. Not an angry smile, not a hurt smile, but the kind of smile you give when someone's shown you exactly who they are and you're grateful for the clarity. How nice, I said, taking a bite of my perfectly buttered roll. Brett, did they mention the house is in my name? And the prenup Bethany was so eager to sign. Bethany's wine glass started trembling in her hand like she'd developed Parkinson's disease, and she began choking on her wine. The color drained from her face, so fast I was worried she might actually pass out right into the mashed potatoes. Brett was looking around the room like he was trying to figure out if this was some kind of elaborate prank or if he genuinely walked into the middle of someone else's domestic nightmare. Vernon's mouth was opening and closing like a fish that had been pulled out of water, and for the first time in 18 years, he was completely speechless. The turkey was getting cold, the stuffing was probably congealing, and my marriage was officially over. But you know what? I never felt more in control of my life. The silence stretched on like a bad movie scene until Vernon finally found his voice, though it came out about as steady as a house of cards in a windstorm. Now, Henry, Vernon said, trying to recover some authority, there's no need to be difficult about this. We're all adults here. I had a laugh at that one. Adults. Right. The kind of adults who plan someone's replacement behind their back and bring him to Christmas dinner like he's a new appliance they're test driving. You're absolutely right, Vernon, I said, reaching for the mashed potatoes like we were having a normal family conversation. Adults are responsible for their choices. Speaking of which, Bethany, would you like to explain to Brett here about that secret bank account you opened at First National? Bethany's fork clattered against her plate like she'd suddenly forgotten how to hold silverware. Henry, what are you talking about? The one with the interesting deposit patterns, I continued, serving myself a generous helping while everyone watched in stunned silence. Small transfers from our joint account, very methodical, very careful. The kind of thing someone does when they're planning a major life change. Brett was starting to look like he'd accidentally walked into a minefield wearing tap shoes. The poor guy probably thought he was coming to a nice family dinner where he'd charm everyone with his investment banking stories and maybe get a phone number. Instead, he was getting a front row seat to financial fraud confession hour. And Brett, I said, turning to address him directly, since we're talking about finances and future planning, you might be interested to know about those hotel charges that keep showing up on Vernon's corporate card. Vernon went from red to purple so fast I was concerned he might need medical attention. What hotel charges? The Marriott downtown, I said helpfully. Every Tuesday afternoon for the past 3 months. Always the same room rate. Always charged to your company account. Must be some pretty important business meetings to justify the executive suite every week. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos Mia and Owen had taken of the financial documents they'd found. The compliance department of your firm was very interested when I called them last week, Vernon. They said they'd been looking into some irregularities in your expense reports. The room erupted like a volcano. Bethany started crying about privacy invasion. Vernon was shouting about corporate policies. And Lorraine was having what could only be described as a complete meltdown about family reputation. But Brett just sat there looking like he was doing complex mathematical calculations in his head, probably figuring out exactly how much this whole situation was going to cost him in terms of emotional investment versus potential return. Candace tried to jump in with damage control. "Henry, you're being cruel. This is Christmas." "You're right, Candace." I agreed. "This is Christmas, the season of giving. And what I've been given today is absolute clarity about who these people really are." Mia appeared in the doorway, holding her phone. "Dad, should I play the recordings now?" The effect was immediate and devastating. Everyone went silent. Even Lorraine stopped her theatrical weeping. Brett pushed back from the table like the house was on fire. "I think I should go," Brett said, which showed he had more sense than the rest of them combined. "Smart man," I told him. After Brett practically sprinted for the door like his life depended on it, the real confrontation began. Vernon was clutching his chest like he was having heart problems. Lorraine was sobbing about reputation, and Bethany was staring at our kids like she couldn't believe they'd betrayed her. "How could you do this to your own mother?" Bethany demanded, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief. Mia stepped forward, showing a backbone that made me proud. "How could you steal from our college funds? How could you cheat on Dad? How could you bring that man into our house? Those recordings are illegal." Bethany shrieked, grasping at legal straws that didn't exist. Owen answered calmly, "Actually, Mom, in Colorado, as long as one party consents to being recorded, it's perfectly legal. We looked it up. These kids had done their homework better than most lawyers. They protected themselves, protected me, and gathered enough evidence to sink this whole conspiracy without breaking a single law." Vernon finally found his voice, though it sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a very deep hole. "Bethany, do you understand what you've done to my career? To everything I've worked for? I was thinking about my future." Bethany screamed back, "About what I deserve. About being happy." "Happy," I repeated, setting down my fork and looking at this woman I'd been married to for 18 years like I was seeing her for the first time. "Were you happy when you signed that prenup, Bethany? Were you happy when you insisted on keeping our finances separate? Were you happy when you were so proud of your independence?" The prenup had been her idea. Actually, she'd been so determined to show that she wasn't marrying me for money, so insistent that she could take care of herself. Now that independence was about to cost her everything. "That was different," she protested weakly. "Different how?" I asked. "Different because you thought you could have your cake and eat it too? Different because you assumed I'd never figure out what you were doing?" Mia held up her phone. "Should I play the one where you and Aunt Candace talk about how stupid Dad is? Or the one where you laugh about him cooking dinner while you're out with Brett?" The color drained from Candace's face. She'd been part of this conspiracy from the beginning, helping plan my humiliation, probably enjoying every minute of it. "This family," I said, standing up from the table, "has spent years treating me like I was some kind of temporary inconvenience in Bethany's life. Like I was the practice husband, the starter marriage, the guy she settled for until something better came along." I walked over to the coat closet and grabbed my jacket. "Well, congratulations. You finally got what you wanted. You're free of me." "Henry, wait," Bethany called out, suddenly panicked. "We can work this out. We can go to counseling." I turned back to look at her one last time. "Bethany, you brought my replacement to Christmas dinner. You stole from our children's college funds. You've been planning this for months. What exactly is there to work out?" Vernon tried one last desperate play. "Think about the children, Henry. Think about what's best for the family." "I'm thinking about the children," I said. "That's why I'm getting them away from people who lie, cheat, and steal from their own family." Mia and Owen were already grabbing their coats. Smart kids. They knew the show was over. Vernon tried one last desperate move, standing up like he was going to assert some kind of patriarchal authority over a situation that had already spiraled completely out of his control. "This is my daughter we're talking about," Vernon declared, pointing at me like I was the villain in this twisted family drama. "She deserves better than this humiliation." "Your daughter," I said, walking over to grab my car keys from the counter, "deserves exactly what she's getting. The consequences of her choices." Bethany was still sobbing, but now it was mixed with anger. "Henry, please. Think about our history together. Think about what we built." I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in months. What we built. Bethany, you've been tearing down what we built for 4 months while I was working to save it. Mia stepped beside me, her young face showing a maturity that broke my heart. Dad, we packed bags for all of us. They're in your truck. Smart kids. They'd seen this ending coming before I had, and they prepared for it like the intelligent, loyal children they were. You can't take our children, Lorraine shrieked, finally finding her voice after watching her entire family plan crumble in real time. Actually, Owen said, pulling out a folder from his backpack, we can choose where we want to live. We researched Colorado custody laws. At our ages, the court considers our preferences. These kids had thought of everything. While their mother was planning my replacement, they were planning our escape route. Vernon made one last attempt at intimidation. You'll regret this, Henry. My connections, my influence in this community. Your connections, I interrupted, are about to become very interested in your expense account fraud. Your influence is about to become a criminal investigation. Good luck with that. Bethany grabbed my arm as I headed for the door. What about the house? What about everything we shared? I gently removed her hand. The house is mine. Everything in it that matters is coming with me. As we walked toward the truck, Mia looked back at the house one last time. Dad, are you okay? I looked at my daughter, then at my son loading their bags into the truck bed, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. You know what, sweetheart? I'm better than okay. I'm free. 3 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of a rental house across town, making breakfast for my kids, and feeling more at peace than I had in years. The divorce papers were filed, the fraud investigation was underway, and my children were thriving in an environment without constant manipulation and lies. Mia came downstairs, already dressed for school, looking happier than I'd seen her in months. Morning, Dad. Smells good. Just scrambled eggs, I told her, but they're made with love instead of resentment. Owen joined us, grabbing his backpack from the counter. Any word from Mom? She called yesterday, I said. Wanted to know if we'd testify on Vernon's behalf at his hearing. Both kids exchanged looks and shook their heads. They'd made their choice, and they were sticking with it. The business was booming. Turns out, when you're not constantly worried about your spouse undermining everything you work for, you have a lot more energy to focus on success. I'd landed 3 major contracts since the divorce proceedings started, and for the first time in years, I was actually excited about the future. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. The prenup had held up perfectly, just like I'd known it would. Bethany would get exactly what she'd originally agreed to. Nothing. Her independence had cost her everything she tried to gain through deception. Dad, Mia said as we were heading out to the truck, do you ever miss it? The old life. I thought about that for a moment, looking at these 2 incredible kids who'd shown more loyalty and courage than most adults ever manage. You know what I miss? I said, starting the engine. I miss the illusion that your mother was the person I thought I married. But I don't miss living a lie. Owen nodded from the back seat. Good, because we like this version of our family better. As we drove toward their school, I realized something important. The Christmas dinner that was supposed to destroy my life had actually saved it. Sometimes the best gift you can get is finding out who people really are, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Freedom, it turns out, is worth every moment of pain it takes to achieve it. A year later, I was standing in the kitchen of our new house, a place we'd bought together as a real family, not the toxic pretense we'd been living before. Mia was helping me prep for Thanksgiving dinner, and Owen was setting the table with the kind of enthusiasm that comes from actually wanting to celebrate with the people around you. Dad, Mia said, chopping vegetables with the precision I'd taught her. Mrs. Henderson from school asked if we missed our old life. I paused in seasoning the turkey, thinking about how to answer that. What did you tell her? I told her we never really had an old life, Mia replied. We were just pretending to be a happy family, while Mom was pretending to be a good wife. Owen looked up from arranging napkins. I told my friends that sometimes you have to lose everything fake to find out what's real. These kids continued to amaze me with their wisdom and resilience. The therapy had helped, but mostly they just needed stability and honesty, 2 things that had been missing from our house for too long. My contracting business had expanded beyond anything I'd imagined. Word travels fast in Denver's business community, and apparently, integrity still counts for something. 3 major developments had hired my company exclusively, and I've been able to hire 5 more employees. The doorbell rang, and Owen ran to answer it. Our guests tonight were different from the toxic gatherings of previous years. My brother Jake with his family, my business partner Tom and his wife, and surprisingly, Vernon. Vernon had shown up in my office 6 months ago, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. His company had fired him after the investigation, and Bethany had cut contact with him entirely when he refused to help pay her legal bills. "Henry," Vernon said as Owen let him in, "thank you for inviting me. Family's complicated," I told him, "but it doesn't have to be toxic." Bethany had moved back in with Lorraine after losing the house. Last I heard, she was working retail and telling anyone who'd listen that I'd ruined her life through vindictiveness. The truth was simpler. She'd ruined her own life through choices, and I just refused to be destroyed along with her. "This feels right," Mia said, looking around at our guests. "Like what family dinner should feel like." She was right. No manipulation, no hidden agendas, no recording devices needed. Just people who genuinely cared about each other, sharing a meal and being grateful for what they had. That's what family should be. 2 years after that Christmas disaster, I was sitting on the porch of our house, watching Mia and Owen play basketball in the driveway, and feeling something I'd forgotten was possible: complete contentment. The divorce was final, the business was thriving, and most importantly, my children had learned that standing up for what's right sometimes requires courage, but it's always worth it. Mia came over, basketball tucked under her arm. "Dad, I got accepted to Colorado State. Full academic scholarship." The pride I felt was overwhelming. "That's incredible, sweetheart. The scholarship covers everything Mom stole from the college fund," Owen added, joining us. "Plus some extra." These kids had turned their mother's betrayal into motivation for excellence. They'd worked harder in school, applied for every scholarship available, and earned their futures through merit instead of entitlement. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my lawyer. Bethany was requesting supervised visitation for Christmas. Mia read the message over my shoulder and shook her head. "She made her choice," Mia said simply. "She chose bread over us. She chose stealing over honesty. She chose lies over family. Why should we pretend those choices don't matter now?" Owen nodded in agreement. "Besides, we already have Christmas plans. Real ones, with people who actually care about us." They were right, of course. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending that destructive behavior doesn't have consequences. It means letting go of anger while still protecting yourself from people who've proven they can't be trusted. A year ago, Vernon had started coming to our holiday celebrations. He'd apologized not just to me, but to the kids, acknowledging that he'd enabled Bethany's behavior and put his pride above their well-being. That took courage, and it meant something. Candace had reached out a few months ago, claiming she wanted to repair family relationships. But when she suggested we move past all this drama, it became clear she still didn't understand that fraud and adultery aren't drama. They're crimes. Some bridges are meant to stay burned. As the evening settled over Denver, I realized something profound. That awful Christmas dinner hadn't destroyed my life. It had revealed my life. It had shown me who my real family was, who my true allies were, and what I was actually fighting for. Mia and Owen were inside doing homework. The house was peaceful, and tomorrow I'd wake up in a home built on honesty instead of pretense. That Christmas disaster had been the best thing that ever happened to us, even though it had taken time to recognize it. Sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the first day of your real life beginning, and that's a gift worth cherishing.